This is lesson 2-6, absolute value equations. Let's review the concept of absolute value. The absolute value of a number, which looks like a number inside of two bars, it is the distance between that number and 0 on the number line. When we talk about distance on the number line, that means that two numbers will have the same distance on the number line from 0. For example, 3 and -3 are both 3 units away from 0 on the number line. So the absolute value of 3 is 3, and the absolute value of -3 is 3. Generally speaking, any number that's inside the absolute value will stay positive if it already is positive, and will become positive if it's negative. Here's your procedure for absolute value equations. Step 1 is to isolate the term that is inside the absolute value. In other words, the only thing you want on one side of the equation is whatever is in the absolute value bars. Now, one of two situations will exist. If the other side of the equation is negative, your answer is no solution and you no longer have to continue. If the answer is positive, you're going to have to continue to the next step. When we speak about the other side of the equation, we're talking about the side of the equation that does not have an absolute value term. Step 3 is to split it into two equations. You're going to remove the absolute value from the term that has the absolute value, and you're going to use that particular term in each equation. The other side of the equation, or the non-absolute value term, you're going to make one of them positive for one equation, and one of them negative for another equation. While these words might not make sense right now, the example will show clearly how to complete the steps. Solve each of the equations that you've now created, and remember that you will end up with two answers. This is the first time that we have a type of equation where we end up with two answers. Let's take a look at an example, and it's number 2 from your worksheet. The example is the absolute value of -6x equals 30. Follow along with me as I do this example. So the first step is to make sure that the absolute value term is by itself. As you can see on the left side of the equation, it's the absolute value of -6x. There is no other term around it, so I'm good to go to the second step. The second step is to make sure that the other side is a positive number. 30 is a positive number, so I can continue on to the next step. The next step is to split it into two equations, taking the absolute value term and putting it on one side, and making the positive and negative form on the other side. Watch what happens. Now I have -6x is equal to 30, and -6x is equal to -30. Again, I took what's inside the absolute value and used it twice in each equation. The other side of the equation, one of them is positive, the positive 30, and that's in red. The other equation has -30, that's in black. From here, I need to solve the rest of the equation. Don't forget your properties when you're solving the equation. The nice part about doing this is that you're going to do the same thing both times. So it's nice to be able to put the property in between the two equations. Make sure you leave yourself enough space in between the two equations when you're solving. Dividing by -6 on both sides in red will give me x equal to -5. Dividing by -6 on both sides with the black equation will give me x equal to 5. Both times I'm using the division property of equality. Let's try a harder example, and this is number 14 from your worksheet. 4 times the absolute value of the quantity n plus 8 is equal to 56. Pause the video at this point to give yourself a chance to try the example on your own. So the first thing I have to do is notice the fact that the absolute value term, which happens to be n plus 8, is not by itself on the left side of the equation. I need to get it by itself by dividing both sides by 4 using the division property of equality, to get the absolute value of n plus 8 is equal to 14. I now have the term inside the absolute value, which is the quantity n plus 8, all by itself. I now can go on to the next steps. I notice that 14 is a positive number, so I do need to split it into two equations. I split it into n plus 8 equal to 14 and n plus 8 equal to negative 14. If you didn't get that far the first time, now pause the video to give yourself a chance to complete the example. From here, it's simply using the subtraction property of equality in both equations to subtract 8 from both sides to get your two answers. On the left, I subtract 8 from both sides to get n equal to 6. On the right, I subtract 8 from both sides to get n equal to negative 22. Again, I should end up with two answers for this equation. If you're having difficulty with this particular lesson, please make sure you're consulting your teacher in class.